Standing at the head of the valley as you look down from Lawn Path, it's probably one of the best positions in the garden to view the scale and stature of the big arboreal rhododendrons that you see flowering throughout in the early part of spring. Trebah really played its part in the Victorian era. It was all about the plant collections, and in particular the rhododendrons. Charles Fox would have been very much acquainted with the local nurseries, in particular Richard Gill's nursery at Trebah at the convent, which is now the university in Penryn. And that Gill nursery was really at the forefront of this sort of hybridising of some of these rhododendrons, and in particular rhododendron arboreum and Griffithianum, which formed Trebah Gem. So back in the early days of these crosses being introduced into the gardens, and in particular Trebah, they would have taken a few years obviously to establish and get to a reasonable size where they started to flower. And then they were a real sort of showcase for what these Cornish gardens could do, the sort of microclimate, those lovely conditions. And you would have got these sort of wealthy landowners from around the country visiting Cornwall, and in particular Trebah, taking account of some of these rhododendrons and then going to Richard Gill and then purchasing them from his nursery. So Trebah was really the shop window, so to speak, although they have a fantastic collection still surviving at the university in the grounds there. They would have marvelled at the sort of scale and the size of the flower, and also the sort of variation in the leaf form as well. They're very interesting leaf forms. Obviously you've also got the wonderful sort of species forms as well in the garden. We've got Rhododendron protistum, which is a fantastic one for us in the garden, Maccabeanum, which you can see flowering with the yellow flowers behind. Rhododendrons really do create that element of the Himalayas. You can just imagine being on an expedition and suddenly coming across these in the sort of lower mountainous regions and just marvelling at the scale of these flowers and the colour and the variation in form. So probably one of the most spectacular and one that takes its name from Trebah is Rhododendron Trebah Gem. It has this lovely sort of salmon pink, really fresh, huge flowers. It produces a lot of flowers from quite young plants as well. So eventually these will be towering sort of 15, 20 metres high. So they're quite a big rhododendron that really does impress with its sheer scale and size and presence within the valley. So these were micro-popped from plants, a plant within the garden by Ros at Duchy College. So we're very lucky to have had those plants come back, and now they can be propagated by normal means. So we've actually increased numbers throughout the garden, and we've also shared them with other gardens, and I think that's where it's important to have those collections move around to other places in the country so that it safeguards them should we lose all the plants here. It was actually noted by Millais, the sort of nursery owner, in a very famous sort of 2-volume book on rhododendrons over 100 years ago, that these rhododendrons were of historical importance then, very well renowned. And interestingly enough, a lot of those plants from the Gill nursery would have actually gone all over the world. So not just sold within the UK, but they went as far as Japan, New Zealand. So again, just goes to show how important these rhododendrons are. And in particular the ones at Trebah, the other gardens around the UK, and in particular the ones at Trebah as well. So one of the interesting things about seedling crossed rhododendrons is you do get quite a lot of variation. Obviously one plant will perhaps take more from one parent and one plant from another. So this is Rhododendron Gloria Pangeric, which is actually the sort of sister or brother plant to Trebah Gem. So a very, very different colour, much, much darker pink. Nonetheless, an absolute picture of colour and interest. So in addition to Rhododendron Trebah Gem, there's Rhododendron Trebianum, which we're yet to discover here, and if it's not here, hopefully we might be lucky enough to find plants elsewhere in the country. And there's also Edmundii, which again, I haven't yet seen flowering in the garden, but I know of 1 or 2 plants elsewhere in the country that we may hopefully be able to get some material from. It's been a fascinating process working with John Lanyon and Edwin in particular. Their knowledge of rhododendrons is fascinating in their sort of depth of detail, especially with species, but also with the Gill hybrids. And one that John and Edwin have identified is this one called Riviera Beauty. It can be seen flowering just as you head down along Davidia Walk. It's absolutely covered in a mass of buds, so in a few weeks' time it'll be in full flower. But it's got this wonderful, very pretty, deep pink flower with a sort of speckling of the throat, which is really pretty, set off against these nice leaves with a sort of silvery sheen to the bottom. So as well as obviously those important gill crosses that are sort of dotted around the garden, and we're sort of gradually piecing them together. Some of the species forms really have their sort of importance within the garden as well. Quite rare in cultivation and rare in the wild. This one above us is Rhododendron protistum, a very old plant with us in quite a sort of poor state. It's starting to get sort of quite old and a lot of decay in there, so I'm not sure how much longer it will go on for. So this is one that's really important to get micropropagated. Probably micropropagation more so, more likely to get results because it's very old and it's very difficult to take material from propagation material from old rhododendrons. They don't tend to root very easily. So hopefully we'll get some new plants off this one, and then we can plant some more elsewhere in the garden. And as I say, important then to also to share some of those if we have spare plants with other gardens as well, so that it's not just here where this rhododendron survives, it's elsewhere around the country.